Betty Zane's famous Gunpowder Run was one of those defining events in the Western theater of the American Revolution. When I mean defining event, when people think of the Wild West, they think of the OK Corral and they think of Custer's Last Stand. When you think of the war in the East, Betty Zane is, to many folks, the first name that comes to mind.
Elizabeth Betty Zane was the youngest sister of the Zane brothers. While her older brothers were founding the city, Betty stayed with relatives in Philadelphia. She arrived on the frontier in 1782 when she was about 16 years old. The Indian Wars of the Upper Ohio Valley ran from 1774 to 1794. Her arrival in 1782 was not quite at the midpoint of the conflict, but on the frontier, that year was one of the deadliest. The winter of 1781 and 1782 had been relatively mild. As a result, the frontier did not get the seasonal Sabbath from the Indian raids as they normally enjoyed from November to April. The Moravian Massacre, Crawford's defeat, and several other smaller raids that spring and summer fueled enough vendettas to keep the frontier aflame in a bloody, no-quarter conflict. On September 10th, 1782, Betty Zane entered American history and folklore with her daring dash to resupply Wheeling's Fort Henry. Her courageous act supposedly took place during one of the last battles of the American Revolutionary War, nearly a year after the British surrender at Yorktown, but before the peace treaty had been finalized. Locally, the war reached its zenith on the afternoon of September 11th, 1782. A scout spotted a force of approximately 260 Indians and 40 British Rangers a couple of hours west of Fort Henry. The fort was commanded by Betty Zane's brother, Colonel Silas Zane. Based on traditional account, Betty volunteered to retrieve the gunpowder from her family's cabin, perhaps as far away as 60 yards. Surprised to see a woman emerge from the fort and sprint across the battlefield, the Indians, American loyalists, and British held their fire, allowing Zane to resupply the fort. By early that evening, they had laid a loose siege line around the fort and demanded the fort's surrender. Their demand was refused, and the battle started in earnest. The emotional high point of the battle occurred about noon of the second day when the defenders found that they were out of gunpowder. It was the firepower of the fort that kept the enemy at bay, and without it, the fort would fall. More of it was stored at Ebenezer's Black House, a short distance away, but who would go and get it? Betty Zane stepped forward, noting that, should she fall, she would be less missed than a man. Dashing out the south sally point, she made it to the blockhouse without a shot fired at her. As she stepped out to return, all hell broke loose, as nearly every Indian and British Ranger fired back at her. Miraculously, she made it back unharmed, with her precious load of gunpowder, and the fort was saved. The courageous act made her a legend in her own lifetime, with the publication of the book Betty Zane by Zane Grey in 1903. She would rank just under Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett in the pantheon of American frontier history for many years. Betty Zane's courageous act was the defining event of Wheeling's early days. Betty Zane's heroism became widely known in 1903 when author Zane Grey, a distant relative, wrote a novel about her. Although some have questioned whether Betty Zane actually made her bold dash, since it wasn't mentioned in contemporary accounts of the battle.
If you like this video, smash that like button and share, like, subscribe for more exploring the American frontier.